Most people believe their main resources are time, money, energy, or connections. They look for opportunities outside themselves, try to change circumstances, and wait for the right moment. But there is one asset that influences everything else, and very few people think about it consciously. That asset is the mind. The mind is not just a stream of thoughts, it is a filter through which you see the world. It shapes how you interpret what happens, how you explain success and failure to yourself, and how you make decisions, often without realizing it. It works constantly, without breaks or pauses, and because of that, its influence becomes almost invisible. The same circumstances can become a point of growth for one person and a source of stagnation for another. The difference is not in the external conditions. The difference is in how their mind works. For one, it becomes support. For the other, it turns into constant inner resistance. What makes this especially dangerous is that the mind can become an enemy quietly. It does not always appear as anxiety or strong emotion. More often, it sounds like common sense, like caution, like an inner voice telling you not to take risks, not to try, not to step beyond what feels familiar. Over time, a person begins to mistake this voice for themselves. But the mind can also be an asset. It can help you see possibilities, maintain clarity, and make choices based on understanding rather than fear. It can work for you or against you, and most of the time people don't realize which side it has taken. Before asking how to change your life, it's worth asking a quieter and more honest question. Is my thinking supporting me or quietly limiting me? The mind itself is neutral. It is neither good nor bad by nature. It is a tool. And like any tool, its value depends on how it is used. The same thinking that helps you plan, learn, and solve problems can also trap you in doubt, overanalysis, and hesitation. It can protect you or slowly keep you stuck. The difference is not in intelligence or intention, but in awareness. When thinking is unconscious, it runs automatically. Old patterns repeat. Familiar conclusions are reached again and again. The mind reacts instead of choosing. In this state, thinking feels helpful, but often works against growth. It reinforces what is known, not what is possible. When thinking becomes conscious, something shifts. The mind stops being the driver and becomes a guide. Thoughts are no longer commands, they are information. And in that moment, the same tool that once limited you can begin to support clarity, direction, and growth. Your mind is always working. The question is not whether you are thinking, but whether your thinking is serving you, or quietly shaping a life you never chose. For many people, the mind becomes an enemy through automatic thinking. Thoughts appear instantly, without invitation, and feel true simply because they are familiar. Doubt, self-criticism, and fear repeat so often that they begin to sound reasonable. When every thought is believed without question, the mind turns into a source of pressure. It constantly points out risks, reminds you of past mistakes, and predicts negative outcomes. What begins as protection slowly becomes limitation. In this state, the mind does not guide, it controls. It narrows attention, strengthens hesitation, and discourages action before it even begins. And because these thoughts feel logical, they are rarely challenged. Over time, a person stops trusting their own potential and starts trusting the voice of doubt instead. This is how thinking quietly shifts from being an asset to becoming an internal obstacle, not through intention, but through repetition. Inside every person, there is a constant conversation taking place, a quiet dialogue that never stops. It comments on your actions, judges your choices, and explains who you are and what you are capable of. This inner voice becomes so familiar that it fades into the background, yet it quietly shapes everything. When this dialogue is harsh or fearful, it limits movement, it encourages caution, avoidance, and self-doubt. When it is supportive, it allows exploration and growth. The difference is not in talent or circumstance, but in the tone of this inner conversation. Most people never question this voice. They assume it is truth, but in reality, it is often just a collection of learned patterns repeated over time. Still, because it speaks from within, it carries authority. Gradually, this voice becomes the lens through which a person experiences life. And without realizing it, they begin to live according to its narrative, whether it empowers them or holds them back. One of the reasons this influence goes unnoticed is because thoughts feel objective. We tend to believe that the way we think is simply the way things are. The mind presents interpretations as facts, and over time, this creates the illusion that our inner commentary is an accurate reflection of reality. But thinking is not observation. It is interpretation. The mind selects, filters, and assigns meaning based on past experiences and familiar beliefs. Two people can witness the same event and walk away with completely different conclusions, not because the event changed, but because their minds framed it differently. As long as this process remains unconscious, a person lives inside their interpretations, reacting to them as if they were absolute truth. This is how the mind quietly shapes perception, emotion, and behavior, all while remaining unseen. Awareness begins when you realize that thoughts are not reality itself, but one version of it. And once this distinction becomes clear, the mind starts to lose its invisible authority. Thinking becomes an asset the moment awareness enters the process, not when you try to control every thought, but when you begin to notice them. Observation creates distance, and distance creates choice. When you can see a thought without immediately following it, the mind stops running the show automatically. A pause appears, and within that pause, you are no longer reacting, you are choosing. At this stage, thinking begins to serve clarity rather than fear. It becomes a tool for understanding instead of a source of pressure. You can use it to reflect, evaluate, and respond, rather than to defend old patterns. This is how the same mind that once worked against you can become your strongest asset, not by force, but by awareness. There is a moment when the relationship with the mind begins to change. It happens quietly, without drama. A shift from automatic reaction to conscious response. Most people live without noticing the space between a thought and an action. A thought appears and it is immediately followed. But when awareness is present, that sequence slows down. The thought still arises, but it no longer demands obedience. In that small pause, something important appears: freedom. The freedom to choose how to respond rather than react. The freedom to act in alignment with understanding instead of habit. This transition does not require drastic change. It begins with noticing. And through that noticing, the mind stops being an unquestioned authority and becomes a guide rather than a ruler. New patterns of thinking are not created through sudden insight, but through quiet practice. The mind learns through repetition, just as it once learned its limiting patterns. Attention becomes the training ground. Each time you notice a thought instead of automatically believing it, you weaken its control. Each time you respond with awareness instead of habit, you strengthen a new pattern. Over time, these small moments accumulate. This process is subtle. There is no clear finish line. But gradually, thinking begins to support movement instead of resistance. What once held you back starts to provide clarity and direction. This is how the mind is reshaped, not through force, but through consistent awareness. The most important shift is not the absence of negative thoughts, but a change in your relationship with them. Thoughts will continue to appear: doubt, fear, hesitation. This is part of being human. The difference lies in whether they are allowed to make decisions for you. When thoughts are seen as temporary events rather than commands, their power fades. They no longer define identity or direction. They simply pass through awareness. In this state, the mind becomes a resource. It offers information without control, insight without pressure. And this is what turns thinking into an asset rather than an enemy. Not because the mind has changed, but because the way you relate to it has. Your mind is with you every moment of every day. It shapes how you see yourself, how you interpret the world, and how you move through life. Whether it supports you or works against you depends on awareness, not circumstance. Thinking is never neutral in its effect. Left unconscious, it quietly limits. Brought into awareness, it becomes a powerful asset. The same mind can close possibilities or open them. The question is not whether you think; you always do. The question is whether your thinking is guiding you toward clarity and growth, or quietly keeping you where you are. And that question, once honestly faced, has the power to change everything.